Hi, this is Graphically Alex coming at you with all things fat related. If that's something that interests you, please subscribe. I'd love to have you. So today I want to actually talk about a comment that I got and an interaction I had with this comment. And so I guess shout out to POV Games. I first and foremost have to say this is not personal. I just think you are honestly very, very wrong. And I want to do my best to describe what is wrong. I want to do this in a more nuanced way, etc., etc. I'm not here to bash or anything like that. The witch hat is not out, okay? But with that being said, you guys know, if you comment on my channel, I may push back. You know, I'm not necessarily one of those content creators where I'm going to just agree with everybody all the time. It's kind of impossible anyways because people have all conflicting beliefs about diet and things like this. So we're going to go ahead and read this interaction. So they said, in my experience, quote, calories in BS, calories out, or versus calories out is literal BS, but the food and macros you intake matter a lot. So when I first read that comment, I was like, this is a no. This is an L take immediately out the gate. I'm going to say something because I feel like I need to, because it's a lot of the activistic side. This is very important. So one thing that I do want you guys to understand is on this channel, we engage in caloric realism. What is caloric realism? Caloric realism is the understanding, I won't even say belief, but the understanding that the amount of calories you eat is greatly related to your weight. That is caloric realism. So it's the idea that somebody who doesn't eat at all will eventually lose all their weight and starve to death, and somebody who eats 15,000 calories a day will eventually become so big that they can no longer walk or function in life. That is the root of a lot of my beliefs now in a post-BED mindset and without an ED at all. It is a huge understanding. Now, there's two things that understanding in caloric realism is not. Caloric realism does not mean that calories are the only thing that matters. That's not at all the case. Caloric realism is just the idea that your size is greatly associated with how much calories you eat. Okay, so it's not necessarily the most black and white statement. Now, a lot of people say calories in, calories out as a black and white statement. I don't believe in that on this channel. I think there is nuance there, especially in the sense of satiety and in the sense of having a balanced diet will make you less hungry, because hunger is not completely dependent upon calories. The size of your body basically is, okay? Period. So let's go ahead and read what I said in response. It's not BS in regard to weight. It's a very specific way I said that, to weight. It is reality. Regardless of macros, if you overeat, you will put on adipose tissue. That's a fact. So the body has different pathways to make carbs adipose tissue, to make protein adipose tissue, and to make fat adipose tissue. If you eat an excess of calories in any of those macros, it will become body fat. If not fat in the liver, it will be fat somewhere else on the body. Period. That's not always a bad thing. There are some people who need to gain weight, right? It's a natural part of the process, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Even in, a long-term weight loss or long-haul weight loss, as I call it, which is like, your 200 pounders, right? Or like you got to lose 200 pounds or, that type of level, 150 to 200. That would be a long hauler. Even like over 100, I would consider that. Even in that dynamic, there will be times where you gain weight and then you continue to lose, or etc. I always talk about it in terms of seasonality on this channel because I'm talking about it in regard to supermorbid obesity and hypothyroidism specifically. okay, which is like its own thing. That, again, just because calories in, calories out, that doesn't mean that you're going to be super morbidly obese or have hypothyroidism. So again, this issue is extremely nuanced and it's very individualistic. So we're going to get into that further, but I just have to say that, okay? There will be times in a long haul weight loss where you put weight on. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Okay, that's all I'm trying to say. So, anyways, this is where it gets a little weird. I'm going to be honest, POV games, this is very weird. I fasted for weeks and been on 500 calories per day diets and only gained weight and body fat after the initial water and waist weight loss. So, this is something I flat out do not believe. I either believe that A, they didn't stick to this, B, they gained water weight. So what a lot of people don't understand is that when you are losing weight, especially from a very big, very hypo level, the fat itself is inflammatory. So when you burn it, it has a lot of polyunsaturated fatty acids, which we talk a lot about on here. They're rich in seed oils, right? That's why I talk about them so much. So oftentimes when you're super morbidly obese or you are massively hypo, it's because you've eaten tons of polyunsaturated fatty acids, usually in the form of seed oils, which is in the form of like fried foods or desserts, especially. So especially things like chips, cakes, French fries, right? Anything fried is basically seed oil. So typically people who are very, very big, whether they're, even vegans, for example, my friend Lisa, she did a video on fat acceptance vegans. They eat a lot of seed oils through a lot of processed, fried foods that are vegan, and they're huge. And that's what it is, So when you have the fatty acid profile so far into polyunsaturated fatty acid, when you burn it, it's like you eat it again, and it can be inflammatory, especially if you're already hypo, and it can cause you to swell. So for me, for example, I'm very hypo, or I was very hypo, especially 2 years ago. And this is something for me that has improved year over year. But 2 years ago, I tried to have salmon jerky, which salmon has a relatively high amount of polyunsaturated fatty acids in it. I'm not saying it's unhealthy. I'm not saying anything like that. But it is higher in that fatty acid profile. I ate the salmon jerky and I gained 6 pounds of water. It made me swell like crazy. So I couldn't eat it again. And I haven't eaten it probably ever since, because I'm not trying to be constantly inflamed or swollen or etc. And it's because the fat on your body has so many of these seed oils and so much polyunsaturated fatty acids within the fat itself. So when you burn it, you can swell. So that's a very normal part, especially in America and et cetera, and being super morbidly obese and all these things. When you're losing weight, you can swell as you lose the weight because it causes an inflammation response and it causes you to swell up like as if I had eaten salmon. So it's all about balance. It's not about like, oh my gosh, polyunsaturated fatty acids are evil. That's not true. Again, you have to break out of the diet mindsets. I don't support diet culture mindset, BED mindset, ED mindset. I don't support it in any form. So on this channel, we try to act as if none of that ever existed. So I'm not saying polyunsaturated fatty acids are bad for you. I'm saying it's out of balance when you are super morbidly obese, or if you've binged a lot, or if you've eaten a lot of fried foods or a lot of these oils, then you're going to be out of whack, okay? But it doesn't mean that the fats are bad. They're just bad when they're not balanced properly with saturated fat, which we have a huge narrative in America that saturated fat is very unhealthy, and a lot of fat people actually try to avoid saturated fat in comparison to polyunsaturated fat. So they'll be like, oh, well, I won't get cheese, but I'll get the chips, or I'll get the French fries. That's what they'll do. It's very, very, very common. It's very BED coded as well, because there's this huge idea within BED that if you can restrict some things out of your binges, that you'll be okay, or that it won't hurt your health, which that's a huge lie. Okay. And we're going to get into that logic within this comment. So, been on 500 calories. Okay, so you said, I fasted for weeks and been on 500 calorie per day diets and only gained weight and body fat after the initial water and waist weight loss. I'm finally at my lowest body fat percentage and still going down, eating over 3,000 calories per day of almost entirely lean proteins and also only whole foods. I love your content and I've been big too. Fully nourishing my body with what it needs and not eating garbage, quote, as long as I'm in a deficit, was actually what helped me, and I'm not going back to eating, quote unquote, in a deficit ever again. So this is interesting because my channel is completely, not entirely based on caloric realism, but it is a very heavy principle on this channel. So that is interesting. I mean, I'm all for us watching people we disagree with. It's interesting to me. Finally, and then let's see. So I understand this mindset. The as long as I'm in a deficit thing. I see a lot of people that have never been fat say that. And I don't think that that's necessarily true, because the fact is, if you eat Twinkies and that's like your whole daily calories, you're going to be really, really, really hungry. And if you want to do an experiment to test what I'm talking about, go ahead and have like typical chips made with seed oils, and then have chips made in beef tallow. Like make your own and eat them and see what you can't eat as much of. Because saturated fat is very satiating. It's extremely hard to eat as much as you would like, polyunsaturated fat, basically, or like seed oil consumption. It's super easy. You can just throw it down like nothing. I know this because I binged for years, and a lot of times I would choose foods that were less satiating so that I could eat more. These would be things like bread and chips and like, a lot of those kinds of things. It's really horrible to admit. But yeah, I would do stuff like that, because if I would have been eating meat or butter or something like that, it would be heavier. So I wouldn't want it. I'd get full. And that's the difference. You can always experiment with it, but that same satiety gives saturated fat a sort of natural Ozempic effect. It's like nature's Ozempic. You get full. I was very hungry a few days ago, and I honor my hunger the best that I can if it's physical. And so I took a break from the deficit for a day, and I had a lot of saturated fat. I had a lot. I had this thing of frosting that was like, it was like a thing of frosting, and it was made out of coconut and palm oil. And then I had a big steak, and, it's a lot of saturated fat, basically, because I felt like I really needed a lot of fat, because typically in my deficit days, I tend to have less fat. So I'd say like on a macro level, for me personally, I'm usually having like 60% carbs, probably I want to say like maybe a little less, maybe like 50% carbs, 40% protein, and 20% fat. That's like a typical day of calories for me. It's like usually around there macro wise. I have to make sure that I have enough carbohydrate. It's huge for me personally. It's super, super huge. And I have typically a moderate amount of protein. So it's like moderate. It can't be too low, but it can't be too high either, because I get very hungry. If I really focus on protein, I get hungrier. It's not satiating after a while. So it's a balance. But anyways, so I agree with that. But the point is, I ate a lot of saturated fat that day, and my appetite went right back down the next day, and it's been down for days after that. It's like right back to the way it was. And I'm just like if I think of eating more, I'm like, ugh. And I had to really push it that day. Like I probably had like 3,600 calories. And my typical deficit day is like 2,300. And so I was like really full, like almost like painfully full at 3,600. And I was like, wow. Because when I was at my biggest, I would eat like 5,000 a day. And I'm just like, I can't even believe I used to eat that much. It's crazy. Anyways, so let's continue. Okay. I'm not going back to eating in a deficit ever again. That's fine. That's your choice. If you're thin already and you're like not having an issue, then I don't have anything to say, you know? But I would never suggest telling somebody who's super morbidly obese, you know, or in my case, morbidly obese, or even allude to the fact that somebody in that state, or even just obese, honestly, should never be in a deficit. That's giving FA logic. I don't know if you realize that, but it is. I think people who believe calories in versus calories out often struggle with their weight their whole life, like I did, because I believed it was just a calculation when calories are a very incompatible way to refer to fuel in the human body, and not all calories are the same thing. They don't get processed, stored, or used in the same way. So I think that this is a very black and white way of thinking about what I said. So as I said, calories in, calories out is very important, but it's not the only thing that's important. Nutrition is extremely important. So even though I may have sugar, which I don't believe sugar is bad, or I will have candy, I also make sure I have plenty of dairy, plenty of meat. I have plenty of vitamin C. So I have fruit or vegetables. Like I eat mushrooms, for example, which is weird. Sometimes I'll have this like mushroom kombucha with Peeps. Super weird combination, but it's like I need the sugar for energy. Remember, you guys, I don't ever have grain. I never have bread, for example. I don't have rice, none of that. So I need some kind of carb because I have a very active job. And then I'll have like this kombucha that has like these mushrooms in it, and it has 200% of vitamin C. And it's like I'll have that together. And that really helps because it's like I make sure I get the nutrition in, and then I do have the carbs that I need. Or like some days I may need heavier fat. So it's like on a day where I needed more fat, I would probably have like pork rinds or something, and then less candy, for example. That's a way that I've done it. So I measure it and I go very intuitively in terms of like what I need at the time. But I think of it in terms of nutrition or nutrients, which yes, glucose is a nutrient. I'm sorry. I know it triggers people to say, but it is. And I'm not going to lie about it. Just as protein is a nutrient, meat is a nutrient, fat is a nutrient, saturated fat is a nutrient. All these things are nutrients. But guess what keeps it in balance? Nutrition, balance, and caloric balance. It's a big thing. Okay? Anyways, they don't get processed, stored, or used in the same way. That's in terms of nutrition. So, and this is also untrue if it's in an excess. So if it's in excess, they all end up fat. So that's not true. Okay? That's false. Absolutely false. If you're not in an excess, like if you're not in a surplus, then yes, it is used differently. But if you've hit what your caloric needs are for the day of your body, then it will start storing it as fat. That's caloric realism. So, anyways, let's see what I said in response. Respectfully, I totally disagree. Believing calories didn't matter as much as what I ate was one of the foundational beliefs of my ED. This is true. I'm just going to read what I said because I feel like I would just repeat what I said. I always tried to game the system using incredibly restrictive diets that were not at all sustainable, and I would gain and lose so much weight over so many years. Yeah, so something that's very BED coded is not believing calories matter, because thinking that, well, if I just don't have saturated fat, then I'll be fine. That's how you have these vegan fat activists that are huge. Or if I just don't eat meat, I'll be fine. because they don't believe the calories matter. You see? Or even if you're keto, it's like, I'm going to have like, thousands of calories a day and I'm still going to lose weight. No. I've done keto. I ate too much. I didn't lose weight. No. Okay? That way of thinking of like, I can just game the system and I can do this. And if I just do this, then I can get a way to eat more. It's a very BED mindset because you're trying to continue to binge. You're trying to say, well, I can still have something that I can binge on. I can figure anything out. And if I just cut out this, then I can continue to binge just using this and I'll be fine. Because remember, in BED, it's not about the food. It's about the act of binging. It's binging, hating your body, restricting. That's what it is. And you do it in a cycle. And the cycle makes you gain weight, basically, because you're spending most of the time binging. Okay? So if you could see how this type of comment is very, very harmful. Like if I was in the throes of my ED and I believed this would be horrible. If 21-year-old or 20-year-old Alex looked at this comment, maybe I would believe it and I would try to do this. And this would be a disaster. Absolute disaster. Okay. As my metabolism worsened with binge restrict cycles, my natural hunger got higher and higher, aka I became more and more hypo. And I would not be able to lose weight doing paleo or keto, for example. So I use these specifically because I believe this person is much more in the high protein, low carb type of category. And I did this diet and it worked the first few times until it didn't. I did keto. It worked the first few times until it didn't. And yes, I tried veganism. But that never worked. Never did, ever. I always gained like crazy when I did veganism because I was, like right here. I also always gained weight being vegan because I was starving. That's a fact. I never could be full. I was never satisfied when I was vegan. It was the worst diet I've ever done. I'm just going to put that out there. In terms of like functionality, I could not do it. I was so hungry. I was literally starving. Okay. I also do not believe you gained weight eating 500 calories, period. I think you are straight up lying or confused. You were likely just retaining water at times, which happens when your hormones are trash. So if you make yourself very hypo through either binge eating on seed oils or through having no calories, you can end up in the same situation where you end up hypo. Okay? And if you're hypo, then you can swell. So that's what I meant by this. And also, like I said, in the case of supermorbid obesity, the fat that you burn can also make you swell. Anyways, that would happen with that low of a deficit. Yeah. Caloric realism is important on both ends, overly restricting or overeating. So yes, realistically, you cannot survive on 500 calories a day. That's not caloric realism either. Okay. I don't even say calories is the only thing that matters. Quite the contrary, as I talk about hormone health and hypothyroidism, and this year the BED mindsets that keep people fat. But I will tell you, this is giving ED logic. I tried to say. And so what I want to say to you guys is if you see something like this, and I'm talking to my BED people, okay? So if you have this issue, I need you to understand that you cannot listen to this. Okay, it is not going to end anywhere good. And if you're as severe as I was, you've likely already tried some of these things. It's not going to work. Okay, you're always going to have to go back to caloric realism. You're going to have to stop binging no matter what you do. It's a fact. I'm just telling you, I'm going to try to save you time. Okay. And I understand that POV Games is not saying this in a harmful way or not meaning it to be harmful. But again, people who have EDs, they don't think rationally about these kinds of things. They get very, very, very crazy about it very fast. So let's continue. I'll try to translate what he ended or they ended up writing. And then, I don't know if it's a guy or a girl. I'll try to say what they ended up right. Like, I'll read what they wrote and then try to translate it into BED logic. Okay. Because I want you guys to understand what it's like. Okay. So anyways, this is giving ED logic. I would be careful of what you personally are doing, because the whole 500 calories a day, fasting for weeks, I'm like, this is like a little bit, it's red flag for me. And certainly would never tell someone with an ED, regardless of what it is, that calories don't matter. Period. So I was just trying to push that point. Like, please don't just say this to random people, please, because you don't know. Especially if they're super morbidly obese, they have a very high likelihood that they have this disorder. It's much higher than the general population. So please be careful. Okay, so they said, I guess we will need to agree to disagree. That's fine. Like I said, you guys, I'm completely fine with you disagreeing. It's not personal for me. This has nothing to do with POV games as a person, et cetera, et cetera. Like, literally, if we were hanging out in real life, I would never say anything about your diet. You know what I'm saying? Like, but if we're talking about it and discussing it online in this way, then we're going to talk about it. You get what I'm saying? Anyways, I often get called a liar by people who have not reverse dieted, but it's been an actual lifesaver for me. And I do recommend people who are tracking and not losing to stop tracking and eat as much protein as possible and only have carbs when they need it before a workout. And it's helped every client I've had. Okay. So let's start here. What do you think an BED person hears when they see this? There's two things that you guys need to understand. Maybe more. Let's break them down. BED is primarily psychological. That means that it has no basis in physical satiety. It is completely psychological. If it gets worse, then you can become hungrier if you become hypo. Like, you can become in basically any ED because you're messing with your food intake and it messes with your metabolism and your overall hormone health and thyroid. So if you become hypo, then yes, you'll become hungrier. But in general, the root of it is psychological, which means that this doesn't matter. So POV Games is saying to eat as much protein as possible because they believe that it's the most satiating. That is not true for somebody with BED because it doesn't matter. So when I see this, my ex-BED brain says, okay, so eat 6 pounds of protein, 6 pounds of hamburger in a day. That's what I think. That's what a BED person would think. Okay. Don't track my calories. Okay, that's great. I don't want to count them anyways. I don't want to think about how much I'm eating ever because any restriction is bad. Okay, so eat as much protein as possible. Okay, 6 pounds of hamburger today. I'm going to cook it up because I'll be fine because I can eat as much as I want and I'll be fine. It's not logical. It doesn't make sense. And only have carbs when they need it before a workout. Okay, well, I need carbs all the time. So only have carbs when I need it. Okay, I need it all the time. So that way I'm going to go ahead and have my carbs and then I'm going to eat 6 pounds of hamburger on top of it. Because if I listen to this person, that will work. I'll lose weight. You see? I'm trying to even talk in that rushed ED voice, the inner monologue. If I can do it, I'll just do it. If I can do it this way, then I can do it. Then I'll be fine. It won't matter that I'm eating so much because I'm just going to eat mostly protein. So it doesn't matter. So I won't gain weight. I'll be fine. And I can have carbs whenever I want because I need them. I need them now. I need them because I need the carbs so that I can continue to eat. Boom. Because it's not about the physical side when you have this disorder. It isn't. Okay? So I guarantee you it would not help a client with this disorder, period. So you need to be careful. I've heard people go much further than this and believe the calories from protein shouldn't even be listed on nutrition labels because it does not act anywhere near the same in your body as the calories from fats and carbs. This is giving orthorexia. This is giving orthorexia. This is an ED logic. This is bad. Bad, bad, bad. Terrible. Crazy. Like I said, it may have worked for you. It may not have. I have no evidence that it's worked for you. But what I will say is it would not work for somebody with ED logic. Because like I said, it would be exactly what I said. I'm going to eat 6 pounds of hamburger today. Because remember, even if they feel full, even if they feel in pain, it doesn't matter. Because the root of it is not physical. It's not. So it doesn't matter. They can be in pain. They can even throw up. It doesn't matter. Even if they get sick, they'll still do it because it doesn't matter. This is horrible advice. Horrible. Horrible, horrible advice. Okay. And I just want to break down why it's horrible advice. Okay. Different dieting solutions work for different people, and I'm just saying I wish I drastically increased my quote-unquote calories sooner. So this is giving like, to somebody with an ED, this feels very like chain email logic. Because again, even if this person is not saying it this way, this is how an ED logic person would take it. If this is a secret, if I can just do this, then I'll be fine. Then I'll be fine. I'll be fine. I promise. You see? It's bad. That's where it goes. Okay. Let's see. I usually don't refer to my protein goals as calories at this point. I just hit my goals and use fats and carbs as a tool for energy. Yes. And if that's working for you, like I said, I would have nothing to say about it. But again, based on what you said, I highly doubt that you're super morbidly obese, which would mean that it's a very different place to be. And again, I don't know about the ED side, but I don't think it would be BED in your case with your 500 calories a day. It's not giving that. Okay? So I don't think this would apply to somebody with these psychological issues whatsoever. I don't. And even super morbid obesity, I don't think it would apply because a super morbidly obese person's satiety is usually messed up in some way because the system is messed up at that size. So I will say pretty confidently on this channel that if you are super morbidly obese, you're going to have to count calories. Other people who are just like obese or, maybe even like at most like 100 pounds overweight at most, if you just like kind of eat healthier foods or, lower calorically dense foods or etc., you probably could lose weight at least for a while. And then you'd probably have to like adjust at some point if you wanted to get really hardcore or maybe even not, depending on how much your system is working at that time. But for somebody who's super morbidly obese, I'm going to tell you with love, you're probably going to have to count calories because if you're losing weight, restricting food groups and things like that, you probably have to be so restrictive to the point where you're eating a very, very low amount of calories for your weight. And it's going to make you either more hypo or extremely hungry, and you're going to end up binging most of the time. And then what I don't want is I don't want you to lose the weight and then gain it back because it isn't good for you. Weight cycling is not good. You want the pounds to come off and be done. So I would highly, highly suggest counting calories from a super morbidly obese place because your satiety is usually off a little bit. And you may not even realize what's a normal amount of food at that size. So just take the L and count the calories, please. It's going to be okay. Okay? Anyways. Okay. I will say I do believe a lot of obese people, as I was, are nutritionally starving. And in my case, when I was binging, it's because I had a severe protein deficiency and only thought calories mattered no matter where they were from, and that's all I should care about. Okay, well, that's not a smart way to be either. Like I said, I'm not into that black and white thinking. That's very diet culture-y. I am happy to say I see more channels covering what I'm talking about, and it really is helping some people. So let's talk about this. Protein deficiency. So this is something that I want to talk about that's extremely important. There are going to be genetic differences between people. Okay? So when it comes to your macros, some people are going to be less hungry having a high amount of protein and having less carb or less fat. Some people are going to feel less hungry eating a higher amount of fat, less protein, less carb. Some people will be less hungry eating a higher amount of carb, less protein, less fat. For me personally, it is higher carb, moderate protein, slightly lower fat, but not gone. Okay, like definitely fat every day, but the carb and protein is higher for sure. All that matters is that you find a balance, and it can change on any given day. Just don't cut out any. My suggestion is don't cut out any macro, period. Just have it, but have it in different ratios. You can even do it in different days. Whatever it is, to where you can stay in a caloric deficit, especially when you're super morbidly obese, because that's what it takes. It does not have to be a deep deficit. It can be slow and steady. It doesn't matter. Remember that you will swell oftentimes in a weight loss journey. It doesn't mean it's not working. It just means that you're swollen, and then it'll go down, and then you'll lose more. Your weight goes like this when you're super morbidly obese. Even for me, at a morbid level, it still goes like this, but it goes down over time. So don't trip out about the scale. But anyways, I just concluded and I said, yeah, I think it's very bad advice that I have tried and it hasn't worked. So I once did carnivore. Didn't work. I've done paleo. It didn't work. I've done keto. It didn't work. Because at the end of the day, I was trying to run from having to give up binging. And I'm sorry, but you're not going to lose weight if you don't. So that's one big reality check we're going to do right here. Okay? So with that, you guys, thank you so much. I hope I made sense. I hope you didn't get too triggered. Again, POV games, it's nothing personal whatsoever. Interesting conversation. Something I definitely wanted to talk about. Thank you guys so much. I will talk to you guys again very soon. Have a good rest of your day, night, whatever. Peace.